promptly.
It seems really...
Your rider receipts, you like them over.
Should be. Oh, well, it's pretty simple, yeah.
I had some notes to myself at home and I didn't bring them, but yes, that's a good idea. And Angel and Shane, I put a copy in your boxes, or had Scott do it, of the overview of the counselor's workshop at LOC.
Thank you.
I mean, some of it, you needed to hear them, but other of it, it's,
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
All right, so we are on air.
I sent something to everybody's.
Call the work session to order. We will be removing the business registration conversation that was previously on, and we will be removing the tree board bylaws, which we will address at a future meeting. So we'll start with the green workplace discussion, and Peter Pasquale.
Thank you, Mayor Gamba. Can you?
It doesn't really magnify in here.
I put together a staff report that discusses, the Public Works Department's commitment to the environment and its green workplaces, or green work practices. And, the practices encompass all of our utilities, our fleet, the facilities, and our administrative services. And there are several areas, though, that I'd really like to drill down to a little bit more in detail and highlight, and also talk about some of the efforts of some of our public works staff that are involved in those pieces. I mean, specifically on the facilities side and on the stormwater side. Okay, next slide here. So, on our facilities, Damien, our fleet and facility supervisor, has really taken a great interest in developing a green culture in his fleet and facilities department, as well as in public works. And his efforts and focus on the fleet and facility side have resulted in reduced energy costs and savings to the city. And I'd like to really sort of focus on some of his efforts inside the facility specifically. There's a couple areas, number 3 and 4 there. The city right now is enrolled in this Energy Trust Strategic Energy Management Program through the Oregon Energy Trust. I'll talk a little bit about that, and also the Amoresco contract that Damien has sort of revived and brought back along. So the Strategic Energy Management Program, the city started being part of this program several years ago. I think prior to Damien being here, Willie, one of the previous facilities technician or supervisor, was heavily involved in that. And then he left, and there was a pause in the program. Damien's really taken a proactive effort in managing this program. He's really started to run with the program, and serving as the champion of the program. He's basically led the team's efforts on a daily and monthly basis to ensure progress in the program. And the program, part of the program is really an energy tracking performance modeling. So we can look at all of the energy usage in all of our facilities and capture that data, put it into some Excel spreadsheets, and the Strategic Energy Management program has developed some algorithms that predict energy usage, and based on heating degree days and weather forecasts and those sorts of things. And you can sort of look at the data and analyze it and determine if you're determine if you're having issues with energy, and you can investigate those anomalies and act upon them. For example, one of the things that Damien found back in April was there was a spike in our natural gas usage out at the Public Works facility. And what he found was there was one of the heating elements that we had in one of the garages had been left on. So he was able to find that from tracking the data and going out and investigating and trying to find out where those problems are. So the spreadsheets that it uses, it provides like a dashboard. Provides that tracks your savings. There's some incentives involved with the savings. If you save so much, you'll get some payback from the program.
What's the number of historic months or years that you have within the database?
It looks like it goes back to about 2014, but then there was a period like 2015 that's sort of missing. Sort of flat. There's a flat line piece on some of the facilities, so it wasn't inputted into the program. The chart on the bottom left, that cumulative sum of residual energy. There's a baseline there of 0, and that sort of tracks if you're doing how well you're doing in terms of energy savings. So you want to be above the line. Being above that line means you're saving energy. And this is data from the City Hall for up through, I think, June. So right now we're actually in that sort of, we've been saving energy at City Hall.
Saving over
From
last year, over some historical,
predicted usage by the Energy Trust.
Okay.
Can you go back to, so the one on the right, it's hard to read the numbers even from here. Is that 3 years?
That does go back 3 years, but the period right now, is there a way to expand this maybe?
Looks like it starts with November, December.
So 2014, the chart goes back to, but the period here is from February of 2016.
Right.
but the other chart
The other
one to
chart
the right
is
goes back further. So the time series graph, it goes.
That time series graph, yes, that goes back further.
13, yeah.
So other than
Those are
sort
better
of
than I
annual
thought.
fluctuations, I'm not seeing there's a little bit of a
Slight decrease.
slight sort of attenuation, but I'm not seeing a lot of decrease. Do we have any, I know
It's a
that,
decrease over the beginning of it.
we didn't see a lot of ideas come out of Amoresco on this, for this. Do you have any ideas on how to start pushing some reductions overall in our, because this is the whole city, right? The whole
No,
city
this is just
facility.
for City Hall.
This is just City Hall.
That chart there is just City Hall's chart. I was just using that as an example.
Yeah.
So, and I'll talk a little bit about the Amoresco contract. That does have a HVAC controls component to it, as well as a lighting upgrade component to it that will provide savings, energy savings. And I think actually, since we delayed that process, pricing on LEDs have come down a little bit, so that makes it a better deal for us to install LEDs than it had in the past.
I guess I also think, maybe this is more of a decrease than it looks at first glance, because this was a really cold winter. This was a way colder winter.
It's true, it's a good point.
Than most. So, and it
Yeah.
didn't peak.
It didn't spike up.
It didn't spike up.
But
Yeah.
So this is
But when
really
you
just
compare-
looking at it's just looking at what they're predicting you're gonna
Yeah.
use based on your facility, what you have for lighting and heating,
Sure.
and based on heating degree days
So
and temperature,
okay.
and then your actual use.
Right, but
So
that's the two different lines. If there was an overall decrease in energy from 14 to 17, that graph would slowly be going down.
But but this doesn't account for any upgrades that we've made or changes that we've made in our system, improvements building insulation or changing, putting in new windows or changing out the
we haven't
lights
done
or
really.
any of those things. But it's a tool to use to track. And this is what Damien uses. He's inputting this information, utility data information in there and keeping track of it.
Well, and as we go into the climate action plan for the city, this information is the baseline assessment for what our options are moving forward. So I actually agree with Mark that this doesn't show a whole lot simply because the predictive matches, right? So it expected that we would be at that point knowing how cold it was and knowing what our snow was.
Okay.
So in reality, we kept to that line for this building. But what these tools also do is, and I think it was highlighted by the Damien comment earlier, is it allows you to see an accidental spike. And it's the same thing we do on our water mains. And we've had this problem with some of our water meters where, I'll give you an example for me, natural gas in my home, they weren't tracking it, and so they just kept modeling what it should be and then charging me that instead of figuring out why my rate, they did this for 2 years in Salt Lake where they didn't actually know what I was using, and so I'd have these total fluctuations in price. So what this does is it says we're double checking, and we have a tool that Damien and his staff are checking on a regular basis, and my guess is the lighting will substantially decrease that, and the controls will give us more ability to literally control what's happening in our buildings, which will be nice.
Will on the predictive amount, I don't know what you talked about some of the things they use, but if we install new lights, will they say, well, you should use less, and then we've got to still always be beating the, see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Put insulation in, and they say, we'll take that into account. Now you need to beat it even more. And
Right.
But all
that
of it's
means
gonna
the whole
drop.
thing will start to
Right.
drop. You'll see both of those lines start to.
And the idea behind this is you're getting, that constant feedback or monthly feedback, so you can track and check and see where you have issues.
But they do take those kinds of things into account, your new lighting and your whatever.
Yeah, they
Well, we'll be taking some of their money, so they'll know we're doing them too. So, right. That's also how these programs work, is they help fund them.
But there's a series of workshops and seminars that he goes to frequently, and we actually get cash back in terms of dollars, checks for going to this and participating in this program and keeping these models updated. Because I think they use the data that we're inputting into the system for a larger picture of what's going on.
So just out of curiosity, that level of energy is, I guess that's not the point of this conversation, but since it's up there, for a building the size that this is, that seems high, but that's total amateurs.
This building is a civ.
Yeah, this building.
Anybody want to build me a city hall?
And
Yes?
Alma does. She raised her hand.
And I would qualify that this is just the kilowatt hour usage. There's another chart
For the heat.
natural gas. So there's
So for instance, it's an older building. You've got
Oh, yeah,
window
you have to take that
cracks, all sorts of stuff. There are definitely ways you can create a more efficient building. But going back to, I think it was actually Wilda when we were talking about the library, there is some energy savings in just keeping an old building too, that you have to take into consideration when you're looking at your footprint. So I joke about the city hall, I love, but the reality is there are some values associated with not transporting materials, not building with the materials, not creating new systems.
Yeah.
All right, sorry.
No, that's fine. I did mention there are incentives that the Strategic Energy Management Program provides. I think just recently, in the last month or so, we got a $1,000 check from them for, keeping our model updated and inputting the data into that. There's a couple other incentives that they provide that we're working on right now. Putting together an energy management assessment action plan, and which sort of sets out what your strategies are to try to save energy in some of the facilities that we have. Damien's got a big, long spreadsheet that's part of this program, part of the model, and they look at it. The energy management program will look at it to see if it qualifies for, savings or an incentive program. So he's got a list of different things. He keeps track of where issues might be to look up. So that's part of it, as well as developing an energy policy, a community-wide, citywide energy policy that tracks with performance metrics.
So like your example of him finding the heater that was left on, then to solve that or prevent that, is it just a matter of sort of having clearer policy about who's responsible for checking and making sure they're turned off? Or do we all actually try to convert them to timers or convert them to something that shuts them down on their own?
A little bit of both, actually. I mean, certainly. One of the things he was telling me that we recently did in our public works building is he put on, like he said, they were sort of child lock, so you couldn't child lock switches, so you can't flip the switches on to the outdoor light because we were leaving it on apparently for an extended period of time. So they put those on there, so you can't turn them on all the time and leave them on. So he's putting in things like that.
So then they're on a light, a motion sensor or a dusk to dawn sensor or something like that.
So Damien really has enjoyed being part of this program and spends a lot of time. I'd like to spend more time on it. And we've been talking about how we can, resource him and how he can maybe delegate some of the other things to Ed and Mike and the rest of his staff, so he can spend a little bit more time on this program. So, because there's definitely some opportunities there for us to save, not just dollars, but reduce greenhouse gas emissions and all those sorts of things. The other piece that he was working on, and I think he was really sort of instrumental when I got here, was sort of pushing the idea that this Amoresco contract, there were some important pieces to that weren't getting enough input from the department in terms of its importance in getting done, and those were the control systems and lighting system upgrades. One of the things I found in the Amoresco financial audit that they looked at when they did the audit of the city was a table that summarized our greenhouse gas reductions if we went through and did the system upgrades to both the controls and the lighting systems. And they've highlighted it there for carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide and mercury. If you remember, the contract's about a $1.7 million contract. $1.4 million of it was painting the water elevated storage tank at the Harvey site.
Right.
The remaining dollars were allocated between the HVAC control system and the lighting systems. I just wanted to highlight that there's, beyond the dollar savings in putting those in, there's greenhouse gas reductions involved in that as well.
Are those making the assumption that we're getting our electricity from coal?
It's our current makeup.
Yeah.
So what they would do.
We are supposed to be a platinum city, which means we're supposed to be getting 100% there.
We'll look at it.
I'll have to check on that, yeah. I do know that it makes the assumption that we were replacing the lights with more efficient CFLs as opposed to LEDs, so those numbers would actually come up with
Better.
Would be that, right?
Yeah.
So are we done with our Amoresco contract, or is it still ongoing?
It's still ongoing.
Yeah, they haven't done anything here at City Hall yet, have they?
And it was the last Monday during the budget committee meeting, there was discussion about, using the dollars that we had. Damien sort of scrimped and saved and reprioritized some of the facility dollars to make some money available for a portion of the project, the control system piece, and then we were able to come up with some other dollars for the lighting system piece.
Cool.
So I'm sorry, is Amoresco, it's an energy audit company?
It is. And this is a little backwards. So typically what happens when you have an energy audit company is they bring in financing and they say, we're going to finance this, you'll pay us back with your savings from your energy. For some reason, that's not the contract that the city signed before I got here. And I think that's in part because they were trying to figure out how to get the water tower done. And they needed to self-finance that, but for some reason, this was the company that they thought was the right one to provide that service. So we did not receive any leverage funding in order to do it. And that's why Haley's been working with Peter and with me to come up with the money. Mm-hmm. So basically all they're providing to us, which is different from other cities I've worked for, is simply the labor and the contracts to come in and make the improvements. So they are coming in and they're changing out the lights and they'll do the controls with our team. But that's really their only relationship.
Okay.
So moving on, the other piece I wanted to talk about was our stormwater team. And they really had a large impact on improving water quality in our community. One project in particular that I wanted to discuss is the work that we've accomplished at the Willow and Fitz Run facility. And I'd really like to highlight Julian Lawrence, our landscape technician. His role in this process. He's been instrumental in getting this done. And originally, this was a project that was forecasted to be part of our 2022 capital improvement project at $70,000. It was going to retrofit the existing basin to put in water quality components into the project. Julian actually took it on and said, I think I can do that and get it done and save the city money. And what he did was I think, put together a land use application and went through planning, and because we were dealing with water quality issues, and that was all approved back in February 2016. Public Works went in there and removed some cottonwoods that were in that park, and maybe I think there were a few willows. And in fact, some of the cottonwoods I think had fallen down and damaged a house that was adjacent to it during the windstorm at one time. So he spent a lot of time on that project, and this is what it sort of looks like now. He went in there and removed all of the invasive species, all of the weeds. And then he went in and planted native plants for the most part. There's a couple things in there that aren't really native, and I'll get to that in a moment. But he's put in the western cedar and shrubs, some wetland plants, and then there was also some other native wetland plants that actually appeared on their own after he removed all the weeds from that area. And it's really it's
actually beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. Julie and I went out there with Ann, I think in late July, to look at the site. It's really neat. He's done a lot of time and effort on that site. One of the other pieces that he's got in there, he actually has 2 or 3 bald cypresses that he planted. He's working with the Hoyt Arboretum to see how bald cypresses grow in the Pacific Northwest in that wet environment. So he's got those out there as a sort of a pilot. He does a lot of work with the Hoyt Arboretum on his spare time.
That's a cool idea, because if you ever find that tree list that we created for the downtown trees, the Main Street trees, we had included bald cypress for the bulb out. So the concept very quickly was that at each intersection we would do bulb outs, and we would plant serious trees at each intersection, all 4 corners. And then the street trees kind of facing the buildings would be smaller trees that wouldn't tear up the sidewalks, that wouldn't cause problems with awnings, all those things. But you would still have a pretty treed feeling on the street because each corner would eventually be, and it was predominantly things like white oaks, but several of them are supposed to eventually be stormwater facilities, bulb outs, because of the geography. And so we had planned bulk cypress for those spots. So I'm going to be very curious to see how those do, because that was also, they were thinking, well, this is a little experimental, but we think it'll be the right tree to put in a stormwater facility, because
Sure.
it can handle that kind of wet feet thing.
Right. I mean, the bald cypress, that's, it's a sort of a swampy tree. And he's really sort of interested to see if it's going to grow there's these bald cypress knees that grow out of it,
Yeah.
to see if those occur here, so.
Cool.
Yeah. So we've actually got some other projects that we're working on as well. There's the Ochoco storm water facility that we have, and we're doing the same thing there. He's gone in there and started removing invasive species, blackberries, and pruning those trees to make some space for some other trees and shrubs to grow to provide some shade. Part of the stormwater quality that we need to deal with are some of the temperature issues, trying to reduce the temperature.
Where along Ochoco is that?
I don't know, I have not been
Oh,
to
okay.
that site particularly
So
yet, but I can
figure out where that is.
It's actually fenced, so you don't see it, you think it's a part of
Somebody's
like a
property.
warehouse. No, it's actually kind of in the middle of everything when you go out there, so you sort of pass by it thinking it's just
Warehouse.
another block of space, but there have been ducks down there when I've gone down with them. It's a really neat little strange oasis in the middle of a bunch of.
So right next, so where on Ocho? So where on Ocho?
Let's see, so if you come off of McLaughlin and you go maybe half a block down and you're going towards the river, so you're going west, it was right in that area, and it was kind of like a triangle piece.
Okay.
On the north or south side of
I think it's on the north
north
side.
side?
So
Okay.
kind of-
I think it would probably be, yeah. Interesting. To go
We
look
can
for
get
that.
you
Is it right next to the creek? It looks like it's right on the creek.
It looks like a.
We'll put a map together. I can
Yeah,
show you where it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was cool. He actually has, it's not even just this, there's a number of them that they've been maintaining and doing a really nice job of it. Most And we're trying to get him another person.
I was going to
Trying
ask,
to.
that job announcement that's out, is somebody that can work with him?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'd made an offer and we had she
An
accepted,
exceptional
and
person,
then like 2 days, she was supposed to start Monday, 2 days before that, because of personal reasons, she had to.
Namely, she wasn't
Job.
sure she was moving here.
Right.
Oh, wow.
So then we've got another project as well that we're looking at starting too at Pennywood there. So one of the other neat things that Julian's been doing too, to save money actually,
Actually, before you move on, just as a kind of side note to people, the reference to Pennywood. So if people don't know, Pennywood is that neighborhood in Lake Road that's kind of it's one of the only HOAs, I think, in Milwaukee. It's over by where the Christmas tree farm is and stuff. And that Clackamas School District site on Lake Road, which may be redeveloped at
The
some
old admin
point,
site.
the old admin center. There's definitely some drainage issues on that property that the Pennywood, because when the school district wanted to do something that came before Planning Commission like 5 or 6 years ago, all the neighbors came out to hue and cry because there's a stormwater issue there, and they thought the school district, that property was dumping its stormwater into their backyards and blah, blah, blah. So just,
and that, I did have a picture of that site, but it's so heavily overgrown that it's a mess. So
Yeah.
I really couldn't see much on that one.
yeah.
So one of the other things that Julian's been doing too is he's been reusing a lot of the plant material that we have and propagating by, dividing plant material out there and taking cuttings and replanting them. And back at the Public Works facility, back behind our decant facility, he's got like almost a mini, nursery going on back there.
Great.
So we're able to use a lot of material at other sites. And just last week he was over at Kellogg Ridge Place and pulling out
I was wondering if we salvaged
some
the plants,
some of the plants there.
Because they're working away today. I got some
Right.
Yeah,
pictures
I
of them.
did too. I saw him out there pulling, he was out there digging plants,
Yeah, well, they're moving big things of rock.
boulders.
Boulders down, yeah.
One of the things that we're looking at doing too is actually purchasing maybe a 10 by 16 greenhouse so we can actually grow some of our own
Cool.
plants. So those were really some of the two areas that I wanted to highlight this evening. But I think next what I wanted to talk about was sort of what our next steps were, sort of in public works in general. And I've had some discussions with Chuck to some extent on this in terms of some of our projects. But as we get involved with our climate action plan, we really want to try to set and monitor challenging targets in terms of energy, water, greenhouse gas emissions and things like that, and try to set the standard here in the city, set the standard for city operations. We want to work at justifying sustainability benefits in our public works projects and grounding them in sort of whole life cost sort of pieces. And I've had preliminary discussions with Chuck about doing some of those things as well. And also design, our infrastructure with those built-in resilience for climate change and other extreme, natural events. One of the things we just recently were talking about was, seismic resiliency and making sure that, we were getting those things incorporated into our designs, especially on our water systems.
Water and sewer,
Yeah.
for sure. Yep. Yeah, that presentation we had at council about 5 years ago, the engineer that Kitzhaber had tapped to do that study statewide figured that most cities would get one, I forget which was which, but they figured it was going to be a year before water systems were up and a year and a half before sewer systems were up, or vice versa. But think about that.
Yeah.
An entire year, really a year and a half, because if you don't have both,
Yeah.
the other one's not that useful. A year and a half, but this many people in this metro region. Nothing. So the more we can harden ours to where it, and his big takeaway from Japan was that if the joints are all mechanical in the pipes, you replace a whole lot less brakes.
Right.
And you're back up and running sooner. And then obviously for us, hardening our wells, or at least some of them.
And the treatment, there's some of the treatment components there. Some of those packed towers need some hardening to it. But not just our utility infrastructure. There are some of our facilities. The public safety building requires some retrofitting as well.
Right.
Since it's our emergency operations center, and
Right.
so that's one of the things that we're looking at as well.
Yeah, don't we have some state imposed deadline on that?
There are.
Don't we?
Yeah, there is.
2022 or something?
There is on that public safety side.
Yeah.
I think the deadline for the utility side is a little bit longer than that.
So is anybody tracking where Oregon is on the sort of early warning system concept that apparently most of the rest of the world has, but not America, on earthquakes? So Japan has it in spades. South America is starting to get it in places. Other
Well, I think Mexico City had it, and then
Well, it was enough warning that a lot of people were able to get out of places that were going to collapse. You only get about
You only get a minute or so
90
anyway, yeah.
seconds.
What
But
is it?
90 seconds is enough for you guys to get the heck out of this building,
Right.
which you need to be.
But what is it that they have?
It's monitoring. It's a monitoring system that can sense, that can feel the earthquake starting to build and create a warning system, so people know to
To get out?
of dubious buildings like this one.
I just signed up for, the email alert thing, but obviously, and you can sign your cell phone, through your carrier to receive text as, email as text. And I'd be happy to share that link with you guys. But obviously, email isn't, that's not quite as fast, but that's as far as I think we are.
Really?
Right now. But I don't know what the timeline is for an actual adoption of early warning, but that's definitely something that I know that since the New Yorker article about the Cascadia event came out a couple of years ago, it's definitely been on topic of conversation at the state level, so.
Well, I mean, they have the tsunami warning, but they don't have it for those of us that want to.
So I really wanted to just drill down on those two areas. I know there was a lot of information in the staff update, but I thought these two areas were really sort of exciting and neat sort of things that we were doing that related to.
The whole report I thought was really interesting. Made me very happy to read the things that are happening in Fleet, both the changes in the way they're, doing the maintenance and dealing with that stuff, but also the changeover that we're seeing in the fleet to newer, more efficient vehicles and less vehicles.
Yeah, Damien's actually spent a lot of time analyzing, how frequently vehicles are used. And we've got some vehicles that are used maybe 200 or 300 miles a year.
Well, that was one of the things the prior sustainability director worked on, right? Was the moving toward the idea of a pooled vehicle instead of staff thinking that everybody had their car,
Right.
Sort of vehicle pool. And she had also found some, I thought, amazing deals on used Nissan Leafs for $10,000 or something. I was ready to go get one myself.
You're waiting
up for the Tesla.
I was going to say, you're waiting on that Tesla. But you're waiting on, that.
Well, I mean, our compact size of the city, I mean, we're really sort of set up well for those type
For
of
that
vehicles.
kind of vehicle, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, I had emailed Ann, and I don't think I CC'd you, Peter, but apart from just the content and what we're doing, which I thought was great, I echo what Mark said. I thought the report was very well written and organized. It was a very well done report.
Yeah.
So kudos to whomever, if that was Damien, if that was suicide as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I guess the thing I would add, though, or the thing I had a question about, I guess, was the, first off, on the stream side stuff, I've sent people emails about this before, but just to reiterate that, the North Clackamas Urban Watersheds Council is definitely interested in, partnering with us on some projects.
We've been batting that back and forth. You should
Well, we have been since I came.
tell everybody the conversation we had earlier on that.
Sure. The mayor had asked a similar question yesterday, and so I got with Rob Livingston, our environmental coordinator, today. And sure enough, in our management strategies for temperature reduction, we have in there as a strategy, it says this, the city will explore efforts or possible options for riparian habitat restoration on private property, utilizing the existing programs through JCWS, Creek Care, and is it Nickwick? Is that Nickwick Streamside Stewards for restoration efforts on private property.
Yeah.
I don't know why we haven't done that yet, but we've got it as a strategy. He highlighted it for me.
Well, I think they're interested in talking to you whenever you feel ready for that.
Well, I think they've been interested ever since I first sat on Nickwick.
Me too.
And you too, yeah. And it was, I think basically it was a cost factor was all. And also some other entity that we were already working with and we couldn't do both.
So we were putting our NPDES, whatever that is, money, elsewhere, using it. And I know at one point, I kept bugging Gary about this, and at one point he talked a little bit about, well, we put it into our street sweeping, funds and stuff like that. So we're going to look into, are there places that we can pull together some funding to, particularly Nickwick, because Peter's got a chart of stream temperatures for both Johnson Creek and for Kellogg. And Kellogg, in many instances, is warmer than the Willamette. Johnson Creek stays colder than the Willamette more often, so and it needs more work. So being able to fund Nicky Wick to start getting some of our private properties. I mean, that big pond on Blount screams to mind. And
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a lot of, that Minthorn Creek area that's, feeds into Mount Scott and Kellogg. That seems like that's easier. It needs it, and it's easier pickings because it's big parcels than having to go house to house to a lot of individual residents.
But we have had a lot of residents apply for their stream-side stewardship, and they go, sorry, you're in the city of Milwaukee, and they don't fund it. So.
What's the level of funding from other cities?
Well, Wes is the only other entity.
No, Happy Valley funds them some too.
Do they?
And what about Gladstone?
Oh, no, West does Happy Valley.
Wes does Happy Valley.
What about
Wes,
Stormwater,
What
that's
about
right.
Gladstone? I mean, they're part of Nicky Wick.
Does Wes not do Gladstone as far as
No.
stormwater?
I don't know. I don't.
They do their sewer.
No, well, they do through Tri-Cities,
So anyway, Wes is their big funder.
Contributor.
Yeah.
Do you get a hold of their budget, or could you just send us what?
Oh, I've got all kinds of.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I'm sure I've got that on the email.
Okay. Thank you.
And the other thing that they do, and that I've raised before, which comes in under where you talk about public information or public education, is you listed all these areas where the city's supposedly done public education, but I sure don't. I mean, I do know we do the don't drain, the painting around the storm drains, the drains to stream, and we've used the pilot pretty actively in that regard too. That piece of it I do think we've done well, but I don't know that I think we've done the pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers piece. I sure don't remember it.
Well, I asked, there's a piece on our website that's got that information on there.
Yeah.
So I asked that question too, and that's what Rob referred me to.
Maybe it would be something we should schedule for like a spring pilot, right? Because that's when people start thinking about putting herbicides and pesticides, and then also maybe, maybe our Facebook page, just ways that we can, in the spring every year.
Well, there was so the Clackamas River Basin Watershed Council did a no pesticide pledge. They did a big mailing. They used their farmers market of Oregon City and stuff, and they had people sort of take this pledge, And I mean, so it was really, it wasn't so much an enforceable pledge, but it was sort of an information campaign that bought some investment, that way. And that might be something we want to think about doing, And it does seem to me like trying to shoot for like March, is the time, March, April, before, because people start doing the weed and feed and the nasty stuff. Then,
Yep. Cool.
And that may be an area where Nicky Wick and Wes, with Wes Hunting, might be able to do a bigger than Milwaukee thing and make it more cost effective because we're joining with them to do it. That's just something to consider.
Okay. Look into those things.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good job.
So, Alma, you're 15 minutes early, but
Yeah, my guess is 15 minutes late, 4:30, but I told her I would start and she would just join us when she
that's
gets
fine.
here. She's stuck in a lot of traffic apparently. I have a presentation. I do have a web reference and I'll just pull up when it's ready for it. Yep. And I'll start. And on this subject, I just sent an opportunity to apply for a grant for a seismic retrofit.
While we're sitting
Of our
here.
EOC.
I don't know if it was just me up here, but.
No, I sent it to everyone who needs to know about that. Sorry, let me just get my,
as we're waiting, do you think Nikki would be open to writing something on that topic?
You mean writing a proposal?
No, writing pesticide usage story for the pilot.
Oh, sure.
I would
help them. And I mean, Oregon City and Clackamas River Basin gave us their materials, and I sent them around once, but I can send them around again. Because, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel there.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Ready? Hi. Hello. Alma Flores, Community Development Director for the City of Milwaukee. Later on, Liz Moorhead with the Institute for Metropolitan Studies at PSU will be joining us. Originally, I was hoping that Jerome Brooks from what used to be called Oregon Opportunity Network, which is the network of all affordable housing developers. They're now called Housing Oregon. He'll be here to join me and just introduce himself to you, but he could not make it. So last minute, this morning I was at PSU for this data hub that you'll hear about. Liz is overseeing that, and I asked her to come. I think there's some really great data and information for you all to help disseminate. I brought some materials back, but when she gets here, I'll let her cover that piece.
The toolkit, the affordable housing toolkit.
So it's different. So what I attached was what I was hoping Jerome would speak to, because that came out of their work. We could talk about that another day, but we can also talk about it today. There's nothing that says we can't. Just that I wanted to have someone in the housing arena come and talk to you. I like to kind of mix it with me talking and us thinking through, but also have some guest speakers to help, because you all are ambassadors to this information. So the more you learn about what's out there in the region, the better it is for folks to learn about and see what's available to them. So that's sort of what my typical game plan will be with these updates, is to give you an update, but then also bring someone that could help sort of further the conversations for you all. So with that, you have my staff report, and I'm going to walk through a couple of the more recent items that we've done. I don't know if you had the opportunity to go to the city's website to check out the webpage that has been created for housing affordability generally, and then talking about a few different elements related to it to kind of get the conversation started in the community around it, inform them about definitions, and just have another tool to have in the community for people to refer to when it comes to not only your goal, but sort of where the city's going with a strategic plan. So that's live, and it's been live for a while. We also posted the construction excise tax information so that people were aware of it, learned about it, and wasn't new to them in terms of the city's consideration around it. So those are all online, and we did post something on it. We have a little section in the pilot on housing affordability. I don't know if you saw that. So we'll do that for each month where there'll be a different opportunity. Last month, I think we had the NEDCO home buying workshop available for folks to learn about and participate in. So we'll just provide more information. I think this next pilot will include this neighborhood pulse information in this housing data hub that Liz will talk a little bit more about, just so people are aware of it and can talk about it and teach others about what tools and resources are available to them. So as you know, we hired Layla Aman. So she's going to be serving as the development manager, and she's going to be helping and pulling together a lot of the different development projects that include housing, both in downtown central Milwaukee, and whenever I can, pull her in for projects citywide. But she's there as a resource for the city to look at the development of and supply side of housing. And then obviously she came to you with, she'll be coming to you with the exclusive negotiating agreement for the Coho Point at Kellogg Creek, where the intent is for mixed use. It has to be mixed use, and housing or other uses will be part of that equation. I mentioned the housing site. We have a quarterly development pipeline matrix. I could send that all to you, but it really is just sort of looking at what we have in the pipeline via land use submittals, pre-apps that we've had that give us a nice picture of what projects will be coming online at some point in time.
It would be good to get that,
Okay.
particularly, and maybe things highlighted that there might be a variance
Right.
or anything on, because
No, it might
as
come
I
to
said
us.
in the first meeting for Rusk, I was in conversations with that before I even knew it was a thing.
Well,
For months.
That's actually a great, I haven't talked to Denny about this, but I met with Tim Remus today because of also making sure that everybody knows where any conflicts may arise, just making sure that we're disclosing the partners who are applying as well. So if we're able to discern not just the primary applicant, but people involved in the project, if they've disclosed that, the more information, the better that we can get out in those, even those smaller emails that we're sending to you as applications arrive.
And just a cautionary note, not all, it's in the pipeline, but we aren't guaranteed that the project will happen.
Sure.
Until building permits are pulled, right? So,
Isn't the application the triggering event anyway for whether something is, whether some conversation that you've had is actually considered an ex parte? Isn't that what
I
triggers?
didn't hear the first part of your question, sorry.
The application itself is the triggering event, that sort of like an ex parte communication.
Because you wouldn't know otherwise.
Exactly. It doesn't happen until, so I'm just wondering if,
When somebody's still in talking about it phase and they don't have it pulled together an application,
Yeah,
is
I
it
thought I just
not
read-
an ex
No.
parte contact?
right.
My understanding is it is not until it goes to
I
the
would
planning
think,
commission,
yeah.
correct?
Until an application.
Question, please.
Is the application, is that the triggering event? That ex parte communications, it's after the application?
I don't think so. I mean, I think, well, yes, that is exactly.
In terms
where
of when you
should
have
be
to
reporting.
disclose an ex
Right,
parte.
once that application is filed.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So I guess what I was, I think it's best practice to just, if you've heard something,
Sure.
even in anticipation of that, I mean, it's probably best to talk about it. But I think really when it becomes an issue is at that point.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
thanks.
So I'll send that out. I've sent it to Ann, so you'll want to see the same thing.
And this is somewhat of, sorry, again, a side note on it. We are also on the intranet working with staff right now so that there's a portal for uploading documents like that, so that when you go to the library and somebody asks, how do I get more information on what's going on in Bernard's site, or where are we in that process, that they can actually pull up those documents and either get them to the right person in the city, or they can actually answer the question. So you all see the community development update. That's going to be a part of the package that goes up. Peter Pasquarelli is actually doing that for Public Works in the future, so you'll start receiving those as well, and that'll give you a sense for when maintenance projects and stuff are coming up. But the nice thing is that it says, if you have questions about this, you can call Layla Aman. And so even if the staff person just picks up the phone and gets the response, the librarians are really excited to have it. They are our ambassadors. They do a great job of outreach. So I believe you guys have access to the intranet, which is why I'm bringing it up. So if you don't, I'm happy to work with staff to make sure that any of those documents, you can see the rotations. We'll just be uploading at the top of it every week so that you guys can pull this
Say
information. Intranet, not intranet. Because
I
those
don't
are
think
some of the...
I've ever looked or tried.
I know, I haven't.
We also can, Christina's going to be doing the uploading. It's not, the documents are all public. It's just that that's an easy way for us to manage it for staff so that they go to one spot. If you guys would like, we can email those out to you on a weekly basis as well, because she's going to be collecting them to upload them. I just don't want to inundate your box. So
You're saying like the actual applications?
No, I'm saying like when Alma has this lovely spreadsheet that explains who's in charge of what projects, just so that you guys have it if you get questions out in the community. It's easier for you just to pull that up and go, oh, it's Layla. I'm going to get back to you. I'll call you tomorrow after I talk to Layla and get you that response.
And that's weekly, this spreadsheet?
We'll be doing pieces of it weekly as they come up. So Alma's comes out every couple weeks. Peter's will come out every couple weeks. But we'll be doing a weekly email out to people with whatever's coming for the week.
That'd be great.
Okay. Hi.
This is Liz Moorhead. Liz, this is the council and the mayor and our city manager. Liz will talk a little bit later, but let me just sort through these pieces. As you know, I'm on the Clackamas County Housing Advisory Board as well, and this last month I gave a presentation on the CET. Partially, I think, because the Clackamas County folks really want to move the other cities in the direction that we've been moving in. I think they want to encourage more collaboration on that front related to housing affordability and looking at different tools and resources that are available to them. So I'm a regular spokesperson at these advisory boards on different tools and resources that we're considering. So vertical housing was discussed, CET recently, and I guess I'll be there at the Clackamas County C4, Clackamas County Coordinating Committee, this Thursday to talk through SDC realignment, to sort of look at the methodology at a finer level, to look at right-sizing it for the type of development that you want to see, like 80 accessory dwelling units, and having the SDCs correspond to that level of structure rather than applying the same, which has been something that a few of you have wanted to push for some time. We're on it.
I don't know where you got that idea.
It's been back in my mind. It's just one of those scenes where you look at your work plan like, okay, I could really use checking something off. And that's definitely something that we would like to check off, and it relates to this housing affordability goal. So working with talking to C4 about it, and encouraging the other communities to think about it as well, because we're better when we are as a collective doing this work. If one city is doing it over another, we're pitted against one another, and it just isn't a great regional approach to kind of finding solutions to housing affordability. So that's the role that I see myself in. Although I'm representing the city of Milwaukee, I also understand the regional context and the importance of that.
That's great. So at MPAC last meeting, we had that very discussion about should we try and do a CET metro-wide,
Right.
and there was pushback from the usual suspects. But I think it's pretty key that we get it, and if it can't be, one of the pushbacks was, well, we don't even think Metro has the authority to do that. I'm like, fine, so 3 counties have the authority to do that.
I think there's something about it says city and counties may, or local governments may, and Metro is a weird bird in a lot of statutes. Is it a local government or not? It depends on the statute. So I've heard that discussion internally.
So either way, if the 3 counties did it, and the way that would work is if a city has it, they get their funds.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't, then the county collects it and then can dole it out where
it was originating.
They want to use it. But if we don't do it county-wide, there's huge swaths of the county that are also having a lot of construction that we're not going to be collecting anything from.
So at least the county's wanting to have these conversations, have these topics come up in these county-wide settings, which is great. It's a first start. It'll build momentum down the road. So at this last Housing Advisory Board meeting, 2 members of the commission were there. So they heard the CET conversation, but they were also interested in tools and resources related to affordable housing and how to make sure that certain communities don't experience what they see in Portland in terms of displacement and gentrification. So I went ahead and sent them the Housing Affordability Toolbox, which you did see as part of your attachment, to the county commissioners and to the policy director at the county, as well as one of your colleagues, Lisa Bates. It happens all. Lisa Bates.
I haven't been called
who
that.
is
I've had people ask me if I'm a teacher, the professor from PSU. Sure.
Lisa Bates at PSU, who has been doing a lot of great work on anti-displacement and gentrification methodologies. She applied it in Portland for the Portland Plan. She's now working with Metro on the Southwest Corridor Plan. So certainly having the county learn a little bit more about what she's doing and how they might think about applying it in Clackamas County might be a great way to kind of, ameliorate some of their concerns around that issue area. Continue to network with different housing affordability providers and trying to get their attention for not only Milwaukee but the county as a whole, since we have a bit of a dearth in relation to nonprofits or community development corporations in the vicinity doing that great work that they do throughout the state here, more hyper-local, but also in the county as a whole, if possible. The mayor and Councilor Falconer, city manager, and Ober and I met with TriMet to discuss the site. That was a surplus site. So I now have a lot of the due diligence items that were promised at that meeting. I did receive those just this week, yesterday. So we'll be sorting through that and consulting, other folks on terms of reading through those due diligence items and making sure that we have what we need in order to better understand this particular surplus site for possible acquisition. Any questions there?
Yeah, so dying to hear about the whole brownfield aspect.
No brownfields. I checked it. I checked on the Liz Esky site, which is, forget what the acronym stands for. It's DEQ's brownfields database. There's also the LUST, which is leaking underground storage tank database. I checked both of them. There's nothing on that site in the system.
Did we get phase 1 and phase 2s?
Yes.
We did. Okay.
So I have to read through them and sort out what it says in terms of, contaminants if it has it. But it wasn't on the DEQ in any of their databases.
Cool.
So that doesn't mean anything, though. That just means it hasn't risen to that level yet. I'll have to read these reports to see if there is actual contamination. The CET work that you all know about, we had to pull it from the agenda from tonight's consideration as a resolution because I was told that it's actually more complicated than that. It's a full ordinance related to setting up a tax, changing our municipal code. Anyway, it's a lot more work, and so our attorneys will be working with me on developing the game plan around the next steps via adoption.
And Dan thought he'd have that sometime this week.
This week, yes.
So it could come to the next.
The 17th. Yeah, so the 10th is study session. So
I think we moved it to the November 7th one already because the 17th has, it's a little booked. Yeah. So look for it in November.
Till midnight, right?
We could have a 10th meeting in a row.
I thought you liked me.
Well, we're getting out early tonight, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's you can store up that.
So that's the trade-off.
Wouldn't that be a good thing if you could?
Yeah, it would.
We continue to work with developers on looking at the McFarland and the Murphy sites, both over 7 acre sites, prime opportunity sites for the city in terms of a development project, and there's this ebb and flow about it. I think we heard that 5 of the 7 acres, there's someone working through negotiations on the McFarland site. I guess the brownfields portion of it is off the table for obvious reasons, perhaps, or not so obvious reasons, not known to me. But certainly the Murphy site is now back on the market. So we're now having to re-engage with developers to see what might.
It was off the market for a while?
It was off the market.
Because they thought they had a deal?
couple of times.
Oh, okay.
And again, the last development team was not successful, I suppose, in the negotiation. So now it's back on the market as of last week. So that just happened, unfortunately. And then again, just working through some of the development options related to the Kellogg and Pietro Bowl site, Milwaukee Bowl Pietro site that is. It's on its final legs of negotiations as well, and so we're hopeful that I met with an architect to sort of envision sort of the densities and development that could happen there. So we'll
and just
hear more.
Because we're on air and You don't have to if you can't, but can you disclose what's happening in Petros in that discussion?
Sure. So I think as
It keeps coming up everywhere I go. People are worried.
As a condition, well, they shouldn't be, because as a condition of the sale, believe it or not, they did have it, they wanted it as part of the new development. So they would have Pietros reside within, be a tenant of the new development at a discounted rate. So it was up to them, to the developers, whoever wanted to buy it, to accept that. So that was a condition of the purchase, and whoever's purchasing it understands that. So they will still be there.
But not the bowling alley.
Huh?
But no bowling alley.
No, actually, the bowling alley will for a short, at least for a couple of years.
You'd see those shirts.
But it's leasing back also.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the bowling alley as well?
Yeah.
I didn't hear about that
That's
one.
what,
What? Oh, I'm sorry. What?
yeah, that,
You think that there's this second that bowling alley will stay?
it'll stay not for a long, long period of time, but he's leasing back, yeah.
So in the existing building?
In the existing building.
Oh, until construct, yes.
Yeah, in the existing building, yep. I mean, yes, last I was told by the owner, yeah. So, folks can feel good about that too
Yeah.
for the time being. So, especially good that Pietros is leasing back and
Right, because it does take anywhere from, to go through the entitlement process to demolition to construction, that's a 2-3 year time period, so.
yeah.
And then we continue to have our regular meetings with Metro to work through the RFQ process for the Harrison and Main Street site across the way for that project, which will be coming to you soon. I promise. But Layla's leading that, so she's, doing great.
Bug her. Okay.
Huh?
So we can bug her.
That's the plan, I guess. And then I'll let Ann talk about the final bullet on her meeting with the Ardenwald Neighborhood Association.
So I met with Superintendent Utterback and with Chuck Robbins from the county about the grant that we've applied to through the county to Metro for designing Hillside and trying to figure out a better, probably more dense use for that parcel. The discussion went exceptionally well with the neighborhood, and they were excited to hear that we all were very open to what the outcomes could be, and Chuck outlined how his policies in relationship back to HUD are different today than they were when we started this process several years ago. And he talked about how this could include some private ownership, so individuals actually owning their units instead of it all being owned by the county and rented out by the county, that he may enter into other agreements with private land managers. So there's all sorts of ways that this could be constructed. And that's why we're getting the grant, so that we can really walk through that process and get the best deal for the community. There are a couple things that we talked about as already said. One of those is that the families who live there today get to come home. So, and that's part of the law, but even beyond that, it's part of the ethic.
Yeah.
The second part is that this is going to be more dense. And I outlined that this is a council that's been looking for ways to bring more workforce housing, not just affordable housing, into the community. They were really excited about that opportunity. So they're in for the long discussion. They're excited to know more as we learn more about the grant. We found out we'll know in a month on whether or not we received the grant. And then getting the grant side usually takes 5-6 months just to get through that whole process. So I want to be clear, we're not starting tomorrow. We're probably starting sometime this summer. We'll go back as we learn more to the Ardenwald neighborhood, but if there are any other constituents out there listening tonight, or if anybody else is interested, I'm happy to come to those meetings. And Superintendent Utterback had some really great speaking points about what the capacity currently is at Ardenwald, and also what the capacity is even as we're growing. Traditionally, apartment complexes don't bring in a lot of families. You don't see as high a percentage of children. And so he said the reality is, even with all the new density coming into Milwaukee, it's the infill where we'll see more families. It's not these larger developments that are currently up for discussion before council. And we still have a lovely elementary school that sits in my neighborhood, and they're not selling that, they're holding it. So if there's a future date where we really do see the increase in numbers and we really do need to manage our population of children coming through the school system differently, he's open to that possibility, and that's why they're building that school. But right now, Ardenwald has significant capacity, and he outlined what that looks like. He also outlined that Milwaukee has capacity. So he feels really good about this opportunity. He's excited about what Hillside and all the other developments mean for Milwaukee. And he's also excited that you all are looking for ways to support families who live here today and making sure that they have a safe and strong environment to come home to. So it was a really nice presentation.
So you guys went to the Ardenwald meeting, or you had a special meeting?
No, we went to the Ardenwald, and we spoke for about 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Was it well attended?
It was probably 14 or 16 people, but they were individuals who have been involved in these past iterations, and they care passionately about making sure that the neighborhood continues to thrive.
Yeah.
We talked about what the benefits would be for them and for the current owner or users of the site and the current residents, and they seemed really excited about what it meant for them and for everybody else.
Okay.
It was a very positive meeting.
Great.
Cool.
Yeah. The conversations that I've had previously, in the neighborhood is really just about sort of that openness and communication. So I think that that's probably really, that's why you were so well received. And I think that's going forward. I think that's just a wonderful plan. And I hope that all the partners will continue to
Appreciate
to
it.
be there.
One of the residents came up to me afterwards while I was standing with the judge and just said, so whether or not the team before you had the same intention or not, we learned more in this 35 minutes than we really fully understood before. So thank you for continuing to be open about what you can control and what you can't control and what the options are. So we'll keep doing it.
Great.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So with that, I wanted to pass the mic over to Liz. I had the pleasure of being at an event at PSU to kind of unveil this new tool that's available in the region on affordable housing, sort of a housing data hub, as you call it, to really help bring forward all of the regional tools and thinking and just really cool maps to help look at sort of what's happening in the region as a whole, and then we can hone in on Milwaukee if we need to. Anyway, with that, Liz serves as, or I should call her Dr. Moreland, right? She does have her PhD from PSU's Urban Studies program, and she works with them for the Institute of Metropolitan Studies doing research, and this is her baby, if you will. So with that, Liz.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here tonight to tell you about the Housing Data Hub. We just officially launched it today, but it is the culmination of about a year of work. I know that you are busy tonight, so I'll give you a brief overview and leave you with information so that you can access the platform yourself and do some more digging. This grew out of a couple of things. It grew out of Greater Portland Pulse, which is our regional indicators project that I've managed for 5 or so years, where we track a number of data sets for the 7-county region, going back as far as is appropriate for the data. And one of the things that we were really interested with Greater Portland Pulse is looking at housing data. So we have a section looking at housing. But within the last year and a half, it's just become increasingly clear that that is not the amount of information that people in our communities need about housing. Housing is the issue right now that is really impacting individuals and communities. So about a year ago, we set out to figure out at the Institute what was the best way for us to support the housing work that is happening out there. And so I spent a lot of time going out to communities and talking to different people who are involved in different ways with the housing market and with housing policy and advocacy. And what I kept hearing was that people are both really overwhelmed by the amount of data that's out there, but also really unsure of where to find the data that they need and to understand and use that data. And we thought, great, that is what we are the best at, is data. So we started working on this platform, which is Housing Data Hub. It combines 3 primary types of data: explanation and visualization, regional housing indicators tracked over time, small geography maps, and then a kind of hodgepodge section that is original research and data stories, where we build on the indicators and the maps to give more meaning and context and dig deeper into the issues. So today I'll show you a little bit of what we have around affordable housing policy and implementation. And before I start here, I just want to point out that we do have 14 of our indicators are specifically about affordability and who is able to afford appropriate housing. And that is housing that is the right size, pretty much in quality for their families. And I don't want to spend much time on this, but I want to show you that for each indicator, we have 1 to maybe 6 different visualizations that show the data tracked over time. This is the average sale to list price for different housing types, compared the MSA compared to the United States, and there is some context about the data and why it's important. So there are 14 different indicators that speak specifically to affordability, and then we also have some small geography maps that look at the way that these issues play out in neighborhoods across the region. So the ones that I want to highlight for this are the affordable housing inventory, where we have used data developed and maintained by Metro to look at all of the subsidized affordable housing. This is zoomed in on Portland, but it's for a much larger area than that. And the maps have several different ways to look at the data: the number of units, the sponsor type, what type of construction it is. And we'll be adding additional information to this. These are officially regulated affordable housing units, but we know that there is also affordable housing that is naturally occurring and affordable housing that is managed by nonprofits and held as affordable housing but not officially regulated. So to have a wider picture of what is out there, we'll be supplementing this with some additional data sources. And we also have done some mapping around single-family median home values and the change in home values over time. So then I also wanted to show you some of the research and data stories that we've been doing around affordable housing, 2 in particular. The first one is looking at affordable housing policies and implementation. And this is where we do some comparative policy analysis for different jurisdictions around the region to see what different tools and incentives are available to support affordable housing and then who's doing them. So for regulatory incentives, we have provided some information about what regulatory incentives are, how they're being used, and specific ones that are being used in our region. We've built a comparative matrix of regulatory incentives for jurisdictions.
And you can see that Milwaukee has
a lot of
none
nuns,
which is why we need the strategic plan.
And then we will update our website, and
Yes.
everyone will see it. So you can see the jurisdiction, the population, the different things people are using, and then we've also gone ahead and mapped this data so that you can see for each jurisdiction how many of the identified tools people are using and what they are.
So question on that, when you say how many people are using, is that how many the city has adopted or how often the tools are actually used?
How many the city has adopted.
Okay.
That would be another level of research. That sounds fascinating. I don't know to do that.
Okay. That's your next research project, is what you're saying?
Everything is our
Okay.
next research project. The problem with studying something that you're really interested in is every day we have a longer and longer list.
This is 1.0.
Okay.
So for now we have.
So for the list we looked at the comparative for the different jurisdictions, and we had none. Are you saying that based on your research and that those should be yeses, or that it really is just dependent upon the jurisdiction as to what should and shouldn't be doing?
It's dependent on the jurisdiction. Those are the things that are in place now. So there are other, regulatory incentives that aren't used in Oregon or aren't used in the metro area. We don't have anything about rent control in that section because we don't do that. So we're not advocating for any specific policy. We're just letting you know what is going on.
Sharing the data of what, okay.
So to date, we have filled in that information for regulatory incentives and financial incentives. And then over the next 6 months, we'll be looking at other things that contribute to affordable housing, partnerships, cross-cutting factors, funding requirements, and financial assistance. And we'll be creating, similar pages for each one of these categories so that we are able to do that comparative policy analysis for each one of these. And then another story that we're working on, which we're doing a little differently, is looking at missing middle housing. That's something that just comes up all the time, and we wanted to get a firmer sense of, we already had a firm sense. We wanted to communicate a firm sense of what that is and why it's such an issue and what the need is. So we've combined a number of different data points from across the site with some explanation, some research around what is missing this middle housing, who needs it, where is it being built. And we have a number of, this is chapter 1 or maybe chapter 1 and 2 of this story. What we're really interested in expanding it to include is looking at who is or is not building this missing middle housing, both public and private developers. What are the incentives that are encouraging people to do that, or the reasons that people are doing that or are not doing it. So we're going to be meeting with a number of both for-profit and nonprofit developers to have some conversations and try to get a better idea of what's out there and also what's coming online. Housing development takes a while, and so we've been lucky to be able to get some permit data for the region to be able to get a sense of where the housing market is going to be shifting over time. And then the last thing that I wanted to show you very quickly, since it came up, is the work we've done on accessory dwelling units. So this is one where we tried to combine all the different ways that we look at the data to get a sense of how big of a role accessory dwelling units are really playing in our region and what the possibilities are. So we've combined this one is just data from the city of Portland, but we combined a time series map looking at the density of ADU permits by year. And so you can really see how, depending on how these units are used, the impact it'll be having in especially inner north and northeast, inner southeast Portland.
And have you been tracking data on that as to whether it's being used as long-term rental or short-term rental?
At this point, we have not been tracking data on that. I would love to do that.
Should we keep a list?
Hang out with us.
Next research.
For the next 10 years.
That's one of my kind of data fantasies is that at least the city of Portland, if not every city, will start keeping a database of all the rental units and just what's out there and what they're being used for and how much they cost, and it would be amazing.
So this is something we've had a conversation about locally that, and then we just had the same conversation at Impact last week. I have yet to find a lawyer that's willing to say, yes, you can, or no, you cannot do that. So we are very interested in being able to track rental units accurately, what people are charging for them, to the size of the unit, all that stuff, so that we have actual hard data around gentrification and things like that. And also it will help us on the short-term rental thing, right? If we know, well, yes, we're getting all these ADUs, but 70% of them are going into short-term rentals.
Absolutely, it's so hard to, with all the new housing policy that's being crafted, to not really know what you're working with. Particularly, I think, with things like ADUs where there is sometimes a lot of subsidy. Portland keeps waiving the SCC fees, so we're like, well, what are we all paying out of that? We're getting density, so elderly people can stay in the neighborhood, and it's more dense and vibrant. Then that's great. Or is it something different? So I think that would be fantastic. So just really quick to show the rest, we also have a comparative policy matrix that needs to be updated every 5 minutes. Every 10 years. Doing ADU policy, I know Vancouver just did a lot of rework around it. And a data story where we looked at ADUs and what's happening with them, some pictures, just some information to give some context around.
That one's got a grand piano.
Oh, no, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. So ADU is it's always defined as the secondary. It has nothing to do with the size. Because I'm in my mind, I'm thinking it was smaller, but some of those look.
So we limit it to 800 square feet?
600, I think.
No, 800.
It's 800 is our maximum, but it also has to be a percentage, I think. This is something I pushed back on, but I think I lost. It has to be a percentage smaller than the original house.
Or the
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I think we did say that.
So, but it's all stuff we can address when we get into the comp plan too, if we want to tweak.
If you're interested sort of to see, touch, and feel the ADU world, there's a summit, Live Large, Build Small summit that's coming up.
Well, this going for sure. I have a conflict, sadly. I was originally signed up to go. There's also a tour, so there's a summit on Friday, which was really interesting last year. And then Saturday and Sunday, or just Saturday there's tours.
I think there's some other special workshops on Sunday, but the tours are Saturday.
Tours of ADUs around Portland, which could also be really, and you can sign up for just whatever parts you want.
Yeah, I'm going to just the talkie-talkie stuff on Friday, not going to the tours on Sunday.
And then the Institute puts out a really great
we get that.
You get it?
Yeah,
oh,
we
great.
get that in our
Because this month's version has an article in there about CLT, the cross-laminated timber, and the geography of future housing, and talks about sort of a lot of what's...
Is it monthly or it's like quarterly or something?
I'm thinking it's quarterly because we don't get it all.
Twice a year.
So this is the one.
I was going to say, I don't.
We don't
And it just came out?
frequently.
I just got it today. Did I get a preview?
No. That is from last February, and then one came out
So
in
we probably have that.
June.
Okay, this is winter.
So February 17th.
2017.
Okay, so we got
That's it, an early release. I can make copies and send it. Because I don't think it might be out officially.
No, that was
February
February this year.
17th.
This last February.
17th, so last year.
Oh,
You just.
okay.
February 17th.
Oh, that's right.
I do that all the time. Yeah.
It's gonna be nice.
It's crazy that it's almost 28.
Yeah, it's almost Christmas.
Don't say.
You say that every time. It's almost Christmas. It is not almost Christmas.
She's one of those
For you,
grandmas that
because-
loves
yeah.
Christmas and buys
right.
all this stuff for all her.
You've got to plan ahead for the, yeah.
Man, you better believe it. I have to do Christmas shopping for 6 months.
So we're hoping to work with IMS to do a Milwaukee snapshot, because they also have, as part of the Greater Portland, a neighborhood profile to help sort of serve as a baseline for measuring how we're doing over time when it comes to some of our policies and development, see how the city grows responsibly.
We're also the state data center, and we do a lot of the population forecasts. So we have a lot of capacity to provide information about population and housing and future growth.
So you're going to be working with the State Department on that new housing needs assessment essentially that they're doing statewide?
I'm not working on that. I don't know if anyone else from my office is working on it, but I'm really interested in seeing what happens.
Yeah, it's not going to be super granular, unfortunately. It's going to be pretty county by county. So, although what they're talking about is if a city has done a recent housing needs assessment, they will roll it in, our data in, so that it's more finite in places at least. But it should be really interesting.
Well, any other questions for Liz or myself?
The website is on the bottom of the flyer, and we just started using these codes that you can snap with your phone and get right to the website.
QR code.
Yeah, that everyone else started using years ago.
Cool. I wanted to thank you for coming. Some of this was really exceptional.
Yeah.
We'll work on a list of all of your future projects for you.
We'll be the model city, right?
We would love to be the model.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be, I would love to have a model city.
And she was very flexible because they asked you at 10 o'clock this morning. And she agreed. I was like, oh, Thank you for us. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I hope that you find the site as engaging and informative as I've found to work on it or something. It's been a long day.
Sounded all
No, it looks like something.
It looks great.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
it looks
so
like a great
much.
site.
Thanks for coming on short notice.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much.
So, I believe
You're adjourned.
that is it. We are adjourned. Thank you.